Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to BWI Marshall's Virtual Town Hall. My name is Adrienne Trout, and I am the Director of the Maryland Aviation Administration's Office of Corporate and Community Relations. This virtual event is one in a three-part series specifically designed to update our community of airport tenants, contractors, and MBE partners. If you'd like to participate in the contractor or MBA town halls, please email us at maatownhall@bwiairport.com. I'm going to start with a few housekeeping announcements. Today's live seminar will last up to 90 minutes and it is being recorded. If you are experiencing audio or visual issues, please disconnect from the meeting and reconnect. If you are participating through the Teams platform, your microphone is muted. This enables our speakers to present uninterrupted. If you are calling in, please mute your phones. We are taking questions today through the chat feature on your screen. To do this, you will select the Q&A button on the right side of the screen. There is an option to select Ask Anonymously. Your questions will be posed to the presenters today during the program by the MAA's Director of Communications, Jonathan Dean. Any questions we are not able to cover during today's program will be answered in a follow-up email. Since March, the MAA team has been focused on developing and implementing strategies and procedures to help ensure the health and safety of passengers and employees. Today, you will hear from several staff members on the MAA team that have been instrumental in developing the MAA's pandemic recovery plan. And now I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Governor Hogan appointed Ricky Smith as the Executive Director of the Maryland Aviation Administration in July 2015. Ricky has more than 30 years of transportation leadership, including leading the Cleveland Airport system for 9 years. He is responsible for the planning, operation, and management of BWI Marshall and Martin State Airports, along with regional aviation activities for the entire state. I introduce you to Mr. Ricky Smith.
Good afternoon. I am so excited to be here with you all today. We try to organize these sessions to stay connected with our stakeholders, and you are truly one of our key stakeholder groups, as well as to try to keep you as informed as we possibly can on what's going on with the MAA, particularly BWI Marshall in this case. We have a very aggressive communications program, series of platforms. And so hopefully you're getting information that way, but there's nothing like having an interactive discussion with our key stakeholders. And so that's the purpose of this session. Let me thank you for taking the time to join us. Today, we know you're all busy. Many of us, although we're working remotely, we're finding ourselves busier than we would in, I guess, what we can call a normal environment, pre-COVID environment. Many of us are finding ourselves much more busy than we were before. And so again, thank you for finding the time to participate in this session. What I want to do as a part of my remarks before I turn it over to the rest of the team is to kind of give you a brief overview of how we're performing with respect to some of the key fundamentals of the airport. When we look at the health of the airport and our system, and whether or not we're performing at an expected level or not, we tend to look at the financial position of our airports. We look at our air service performance with respect to BWI in particular, and we also look at our people. How are they performing? How are they feeling? And that gives us a snapshot as to what kind of performance we should get out of them. And so I'll touch on those three. Won't go into a lot of detail because we have great speakers that are following me, and they will do a deeper dive into many of these topics. So with respect to finances, first of all, I'll ask everyone to mute your microphone if you're not talking. So with respect to our financial situation, you'll find that almost every organization in the country, if not the world, particularly those in the aviation industry, but any company or organization has had to make some downward adjustments to its budget in a response to its loss of revenues, and that's the same with MAA. And so we've taken about an $18 million reduction in our operating budget, just to make sure that we are staying in line with our revenues as much as possible. We're repeatedly taking looks at that throughout the year to make sure that we're making whatever adjustments we have to make as we go through the year. But that does not include any layoffs or any furloughs for MAA employees. What we've done, however, is we've tightened up our efforts to fill vacant positions. Many of our vacant positions, particularly those that are somewhat discretionary, are not being filled. We're holding those positions vacant. We do have some critical positions, particularly in our operations area, our maintenance area, those public safety areas like the fire department, for example, that are just critical to maintaining a safe and secure airport facility. And so those obviously are given some discretion to. And so about an $18 million reduction in our operating budget. On the capital side, where we fund our major projects, the CTP that was announced a couple weeks ago reflects about a $500 million cut for MAA. That includes BWI and Martin State Airport. That is substantially a deferral of a bond issuance that we were planning to do, but we're delaying it a little bit, not for a very long time, but a little bit. We're delaying the $500 million bond issuance to support the Concourse AB connector and baggage handling system. And that's primarily to give some time for the bond markets to settle. As you know, when you're going through a pandemic, Wall Street, the credit industry, they get a little nervous when they can't see certainty out in the future. And so until that certainty is restored, it's not the best time right now to go out with a significant bond issuance. And so so that's the $500 million reduction in our capital program. We continue to move forward with some significant projects, including the 5-gate extension on A. We're about to do a major taxiway T rehabilitation project, as well as some other projects that are mostly safety related. We also engaged in a very significant financial relief effort for our tenant partners. This is an ecosystem that is interdependent. In order for our airport to serve our customers effectively, we all have to have some level of financial health. And so we embarked on an effort to do the best that we can to provide some rent relief. And depending on the tenant and the type of agreement we have, that influenced the type of rent relief that we were able to provide. There are some restrictions on what kind of rent relief we can give to certain tenants, but trust me, we maximized those efforts, and not that we were seeking it, but we actually established a reputation in the industry as an airport that did a lot to try to support our tenants. And so those are some highlights with respect to our financial situation. Air service, so today, or at least as of yesterday, based on passengers going through our security checkpoints, our traffic continues to be down around 67%. It's been steady there for almost since the 4th of July. It seems to be hovering around 67%. And so a lot of things have to happen outside of the airport environment for that to change. And so we're waiting for that to change, for that environment to change to help the economy kind of recover. But that's where we are. However, you'll hear later on that despite where we are, we're still doing pretty well. For example, I mean, we're about 51% of all the passenger traffic that's coming through the Washington-Baltimore region is coming through BWI. So that makes BWI an airport that's handling more traffic than Washington Dulles and Reagan National combined. And so that's a pretty good position to be in, which suggests that although things are tough, we're still doing well compared to the rest of the industry. And then from a cargo standpoint, which has been a recent mainstay of ours, we're handling about 62% of all the air freight that's being moved through the Washington-Baltimore region. BWI in the past has not been the predominant air freight airport, but now we're handling some 60+% of that cargo, again, speaking to how well we're doing compared to other airports. And then finally, but certainly not of least important, we do constant surveys of our workforce to make sure that our employees are doing well. At least we understand what has to be done to improve their ability to perform. And I'm very happy to say that our employees are doing very well, considering the challenging environment that they have to work under, teleworking. Although inviting on a temporary basis, we're hearing from our employees that they miss the opportunity to socialize and interact with their co-workers, or to some degree, what has become almost like family. And so that has the risk of having some psychological impacts on people that are working in those environments. And so we try to make sure that we're providing as much support to them to stay as connected as we can to our coworkers. And we think that's working, at least it's reflected in our survey. The last point I'll make is we take pride in one, trying to make sure that we have a very, very diverse workforce on all kinds of measures. You think about diversity, whatever you want to throw into that diversity pool, you can. We try to achieve diversity, and we try to achieve diversity in a way that it drives performance. It positions us to be a high-performing organization relative to other airports. And so we were recently recognized by Airport Council International North America, which is the largest international trade organization. We were recognized by them as the airport deserving of the Inclusion Award for large hub airports. That's this award, which is very difficult to get, recognizes airports that are able to find that balance between achieving diversity, which simply means having a variety of people in your organization, but to also have those people actively engaged in what you're doing. That's the inclusion part. And so, so that is recognized. And in addition to that, it recognizes the fact that we are performing at a high level because we have systems in place to hold employees accountable by establishing expectations, helping them drive expectations, and then giving them feedback and rewarding them for performance. And so we're very proud of this award. And again, it's just a testament to the professional team we have here at MAA and their dedication to just continue to do whatever they do in a manner that reflects our vision, which is to be better. And in this case, we're talking about MAA, but I think this could apply to the entire BWI and Martin State Airport family, our entire ecosystem. And so you're certainly the best group of co-workers that I can imagine working with. You make me proud every day. You make our stakeholders proud every day. And so I want to thank you, our tenant partners, for being courageous and resilient and continuing to provide a high level of service in a reliable manner to those customers and employees that rely on BWI Marshall and Martin State Airport. Cannot thank you enough. With that being said, I will turn it over to the next speaker, Bernadette Bridges, who is our Director of the Office of Safety and Risk Management. She is responsible for making sure that we're safe and that we are conscious of how safely we can operate. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Bernadette Bridges. Today, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about strategies that we used at the MAA during this COVID-19 pandemic to ensure that the safety of our employees, our contractors, our tenants, and visitors at MAA are safe. So some of the strategies that we put in place to mitigate hazards and exposure and risk to our employees were initially we initiated a COVID-19 team. That team consisted of several employees where we were able to, if we got a notification that there was a potential risk or a report that we had a positive case or somebody had been exposed, that we could talk about it, we could trace it, and that we could make sure that we minimize the risk by an exposure by having this team in place. There were several people involved. This was also included some of our contractors talking to our tenants, talking to our contractors, working with our construction teams, and also work with our MA employees and other MDOT managers as well. We also took the opportunity to reach out to other airports to see how they were managing their airport COVID teams and some of the strategies they were using. There's also using the CDC updates as well as OSHA updates, regulatory FAA updates, and other updates related to airport risk so that we had all the information in place. We also sent streams out to employees and contractors from the Center for Disease Control. We send those updates out daily or as needed. As we receive new updates, we made sure that employees, contractors, and managers had that information so that they could be aware of all the new updated information related to COVID-19. We also distributed posters and current news events and information. We listened to our governor, we listened to the news, we listened to several news stations as new breaking news came out about the CDC, so we could share that information, but also be updated internally that we could share information with our MAA environment. The distribution of face coverings in coordination with our procurement department. We also not only distributed those masks to our MAA employees, but those masks were also distributed to our contractors and tenants, and they are still available if they need them. They also were distributed to our customers as well. Distribution of face coverings also to other agencies that work internally with us that, for example, we have other security agencies that work with us. We have some partners that work with us, and we were able to distribute masks to them as well. We also developed a COVID-19 safety toolkit for our MA employees, which has a safety key in it that they could use for touch points that potentially other people would touch to keep them from having to touch doorknobs and handles and picking up things. They could actually use their key. It actually has a thermometer in it. It actually has gloves, additional masks, and hand sanitizer. Also, we implemented screening protocols for employees and contractors and tenants. We have several facilities. Some of our 24-hour facilities, you have to actually have your temperature taken at those facilities. The protocols require you to answer questions before entering our facilities anytime that you would enter a facility, whether you're an employee, contractor, or a tenant. And those are ways that we were able to minimize the risk at the BWI Airport. We also had employee acknowledgement forms for employees to make a commitment to actually wear their face coverings while they're in the workplace. And we've also had asked our tenants and contractors to also make that commitment as well. Next slide. This is just a sample of our safety toolkit and some of the things that were actually in the toolkit. The next slide. strategies to minimize risk during COVID, we actually continue to do safety inspections of our screening locations to ensure that our screeners are doing exactly what is required of them to do based on what the state requires us to do at our state facility locations. We monitor those locations, also coordination with our facilities, maintenance and planning and engineering departments to install plexiglass barriers. Many of our customers come in contact with our employees at the MAA, and we also, they also have contact with contractors. So we actually install plexiglass at some of our locations, and our customer service areas, also information booths, and also our engineering and planning department has actually been around and actually installed them at some of our facilities as well, all throughout the airport. We also coordinated with our marketing department and signed shop for messaging for our public and for employees, ensuring that we're using the CDC guidelines and the governor's executive orders and also requirements for the Maryland Department of Transportation. Those are just some of the messaging we use in marketing we would use for the public and for our employees and anyone that would enter in our facilities or would come into our airports. Coordination with the Anne Arundel County Health Department with complaints and concerns. We actually coordinate with them. They reach out to us. We reach out to them for information. If there was a concern or complaint, we also work with them really closely. Updated email alerts from the CDC and messaging on our MAA display boards. We have several display boards throughout the airport. Those are in public areas, but also in our employee areas. Also, we actually did research on industry best practices for technology and initiatives from other airports and risk managers at other airports and the Maryland Department of Transportation. Be able to see best practices and what they were doing, also that we could share information, but also sometimes we were able to get information that we could actually use at our airport at BWI. We also speak with our employees and tenants and contractors through various meetings, through Teams meetings, through information that we sent out, and also through telephone calls or emails who have concerns related to COVID-19, and also sharing safety initiatives to ensure that they are compliant with CDC requirements as well. Slide. And these are just some of the poster examples that we use. The CDC has several posters that we were able to get from them, and we were able to use those throughout the pandemic as we begin the process. But we also have developed a safety announcement for our employees, of posters that we can actually put into the workplace and that we were able to share throughout the BWI airport to remind people to continue to social distance, how to be in a meeting, if you have to be in an in-place meeting, how training rooms should be set up, the use how to schedule meetings, how to wear your face coverings, the use of sanitizer, washing your hands, keeping space, moving around in a space where it's shared community space, and just reminding our employees how to work safely, and also our contractors and tenants as well. Next slide. And Jonathan, are there any questions?
We do not have any questions at this point related to health and safety initiatives, but we do appreciate the update there from you, Bernadette.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadette. This is Adrienne again, folks. We appreciate, Bernadette, we appreciate your commitment to the safety of the airport community. I also wanted to mention to everybody, Ricky was being a little bit humble. He recently earned the recipient of the new 2020 Leon C. Watkins Guardian Award for Excellence in Business Diversity. His proven leadership and commitment to the values of diversity and inclusion helped him earn that award. And one example is his involvement in the founding of many outreach and partnership programs for small and minority entrepreneurs, such as Launchpad, which includes some of our tenants. So I wanted to let everybody know about that and just say thank you to Ricky. We appreciate his steadfast leadership during this unprecedented time. Next up, we have Greg Solek. Greg is the acting director for the MAA's Office of Airport Operations. His team of essential personnel has worked tireless during the pandemic. Greg is going to review the measures that have been taken to ensure that our passengers travel safely through BWI Marshall Airport. And now we will hear from Greg.
Greg, you might want to unmute your mic.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Adrian, and good afternoon. As I take you through our Runway to Recovery program, you will see the steps taken by BWI Marshall to ensure a safe and secure environment for our customers and all our airport employees. This program encompasses the entire passenger journey from the passenger pre-departure research to arriving in our parking lots and continues through our terminal to our boarding gate. Next slide, please. Our safety and awareness campaign continuously reminds the airport of the requirement for facial coverings and the importance of social distancing. These reminders are accomplished through our webinar series, airport-wide signage, and the ability to offer our community free facial coverings, which are distributed at our customer service counters. Next slide. Our Safe to Fly campaign has been proven to be successful, which is evident through our increasing passenger loads. And as you heard from Mr. Smith, our passenger loads continues to be higher than Reagan, National, and Dulles. Our Safe to Fly program is communicated through a robust social media program and is supported by press conferences, media relations, and advertising. We also push information to our customers' mobile phones through geofencing messaging. Next slide. We've established a comprehensive shuttle bus and transportation program, ensuring our shuttle buses are cleaned more often, run more frequently with our longer articulating buses. We've also expanded our Checkpoint Ambassador program to oversee and ensure social distancing is maintained at the bus stops and on the buses themselves. We've also lowered our parking rates with our hourly garage, which is adjacent to the terminal and is walkable, to a $12 a day fee. Next slide, please. We've installed numerous hand sanitizer stations throughout the airport, both pre and post security. Next slide. In addition to the increased hand sanitizer stations, we've installed 7 PPE vending machines pre-security that dispenses gloves, facial coverings, cleaning wipes, etc. Next slide. The next few slides will show the steps taken to implement social distancing and to promote a safe terminal-wide environment with the installation of floor markings and plexiglass. Reminder signs have also been placed on our terminal entry doors and throughout our facility. This is just an example of the different social distancing markers that we place throughout our terminal. You'll see in the next couple slides that it is not only at our ticket counters, but it is at our security, it's at our concessions. Next slide, please. This is an example of the social distancing and wraps that we have in our columns that are located at the ticket counter. Next slide. The plexiglass and social distance markings at our security checkpoints, which ensures that both the customers and the security team is safe. Next slide. The floor markings at our concessions to ensure that everyone maintains a 6-foot social distancing and can also get whatever needs prior to departing on the flight. Next slide. We've also installed plexiglass at our concessions, at our food vendors' check-ins and delivery stations. Next slide. Social distancing markers and plexiglass has been installed at all of our information counters to ensure, again, both the employee and the customers remain safe. Next slide. Our protocols for continuous cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting are based on the established definitions that you see in this slide. These are conducted continuously throughout the day and throughout the night. Next slide. Touchpoint disinfecting is very, very important to us. We've developed a comprehensive disinfecting schedule which covers approximately 2.2 million square feet of terminal. The electrostatic spraying of EPA-rated disinfectants are completed on a daily basis. Our team continuously researches new products to ensure we're using the most effective products on the market. Some of the touch points you'll see are doors, doorknobs, door openers, escalators, handrails, airline ticket counters, boarding area furnitures. But of most particular, the TSA bins. They are cleaned and disinfected every hour. Jonathan, are there any questions for me?
One question. This would be good for you or for Ricky, perhaps. And I'll start with a commentary. I know in the early days of the pandemic, airports across the country, including BWI Marshall, placed restrictions on entry into the terminal, really, encouraging only customers, travelers, ticketed passengers, and employees. Airport. We do have a question from one of our viewers asking, do we know, or what does the airport think, when does the airport think that it will be open for non-ticketed passengers? I don't know if you have any thoughts to that matter, if it's something we've discussed at this point, but that's one question that has been posed.
So I'll take a shot at that. So there's no timetable at this point for when those restrictions will be lifted. Those restrictions, as you may or may not know, is in response to an executive order issued by the governor some 3 months ago. And at this point, there's not a discussion internally about lifting those restrictions. The restrictions have not caused any stress or burden on our traveling public, particularly since our traffic levels are down. And so just to err on the side of caution, we're likely to keep those restrictions in place for as long as we can until it begins to pose some kind of an issue. We think it's an important safety stopgap measure, and so we're keeping them in place for now.
There is one other additional question here, and this may be more of a maintenance or facilities question, so I'm not sure, Greg, if you or Ricky would have an answer to this. This may be a type of question that we would need to follow up, following the meeting at a later date here. But one of the tenants is asking if there has anything been done to increase airflow throughout the airport terminal and the concourses.
Jonathan, I know that's been looked at, and I know that we've increased our filters as far as the micron rating. I believe as far as the airflow, I cannot answer that one, but I do know that our filters have been increased to a higher micron rating.
Thank you, Greg. Adrian, you may introduce the next speaker, please.
Okay, before I do that, I just want to give our participants a couple reminders in case you logged in after I gave the housekeeping announcements. If you are experiencing audio or visual issues, please disconnect from the meeting and reconnect. We are taking questions today, and any questions we're not able to cover during today's program will be answered in a follow-up email. And those questions you can pose in the chat feature on the right side of your screen. For anybody who called in rather than log in through the Teams platform, please mute your phones. And our next speaker, I want to introduce Gemini Erskine. The Office of Commercial Management is dedicated to the success of every tenant at BWI Marshall Airport. We will now hear from Gemini Erskine, who is the director of that office, who will share highlights of how her team has been working with the tenant community since March.
Thank you, Adrian, and good afternoon, everyone. So as Ricky mentioned in his introduction, MAA quickly implemented certain relief measures to many of our aeronautical and non-aeronautical tenants, including certain rent relief, flexibility in hours of operations, closures, and consolidating operations. We're reviewing additional relief for our in-terminal food, beverage, and retail operators, including a one-year extension of their current contract terms. About 53% of our food and beverage retail concessions program is currently open. From an industry standpoint, it's higher than most airports, so kudos to you all. We do want to thank all of our tenants who stayed open or reopened during the pandemic and for implementing all the safety protocols to ensure all the employees and our traveling public remain safe. Next slide. So just a few things that are happening from airport development. So if you haven't noticed already, we have a very beautiful terminal expansion on Concourse A that was completed on August 30th. We also have the taxiway T replacement project, which on the image is the circled area that runs parallel to the AB connector. That project will kick off in the spring of 2021, at which time the gates A1 through A5 will close. Next slide. We have a new member of the BWI Marshall Concessions community. Please welcome a new amenity called Minute Suites, which opened on October 1st and is located between Gate C3 and Urban Barbecue. Minute Suites are individual rooms which can be used to relax and unmask. Minute Suite has locations in 4 other airports, but for the new BWI Marshall location, they added wider day beds, Apple TV, Amazon Alexa, and hospital-grade air purification system. Next slide. So prior to opening, Minute Suites developed a Clean and Serene program, which includes a 7-step process to properly clean and sanitize each room for the next guest. Minute Suites developed relationships with airlines so that this amenity can also be used by flight crews and airline employees. We're really excited about this amenity for our passengers and for our tenant community. So if you happen to walk by, please say hello to the folks working there. Thank you. Jonathan, are there any questions?
There are a couple of questions. One, and this is not probably directly for you, but you mentioned during your comments the A extension. This would be a good comment for Ricky, I think. One of our pre-submitted questions from a tenant, they were asking, after seeing the new restrooms on A Pier, what will the updated bathrooms look like throughout the other piers and throughout the airport?
All right, so so the new restrooms on the new 5 gates on A is an introduction of the new restrooms that we will develop throughout the airport terminal building. There are some minor features that will be included in the new restrooms that we build outside of the 5-gate extension, simply because we've been progressing with the design. But what you will find is the larger restroom program will reduce the number of restrooms, but will increase the size of the restrooms. It will include safety measures that allows one to not transfer germs and water and paper unnecessarily. We'll introduce technology to our restrooms that allows you to know what's going on in the restrooms from a capacity standpoint before you get into the restrooms. And so it's going to be pretty neat. We think these will be state-of-the-art restrooms in the industry. We've involved other industry experts with respect to restrooms to help us come up with these designs. And so that program will actually start next year in earnest, and hopefully you will appreciate the new restrooms. Again, it will be a reduced number of restrooms, but the restrooms will be larger restrooms, male restrooms, female restrooms, as well as family unisex restrooms.
Thank you, Ricky. Gemini, there is a question related to concessions that came in. An individual was asking about the status of the Green Beans coffee location down, I guess, what is the status of the Green Beans location, a shop replacement on E-Pier? Is there any update there that you could provide us by chance?
So that location is part of an RFP package that Fraport is putting out or has put out. They are expecting bids back. So until that process is complete, we really don't have any other further update on it. But we will follow up with Fraport after the submission of those responses.
Okay. One additional tenant question related to concessions, in particular to alcohol. An individual is asking about the possibility of selling alcohol to go for consumption, throughout the concourses. I know the individual indicates that Fraport was looking into this and is asking, I guess, if commercial management has any comment or update on the possibility of offering the concessions offering alcohol to go.
That's a great question. So we did do a little bit of research internally. We did have our Attorney General's office look at some of the statutes and regulations that are in place, as well as COMAR. Now, we know that the liquor licenses are Anne Arundel County, but we do, since we're a state facility, we do have to look at the state regulations. And right now there is some challenge with offering alcohol to go, but we are working with our AG's office to seeing if there's anything that we can do. But for right now, it's not something that we can allow.
And just if I can provide clarification, when we talk about alcohol to go, this is not selling alcohol to take away from the airport. This is to be able to take your drinks from the restaurant to a concourse, to a gate area or hold room, correct?
Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that it for questions, Jonathan?
That is at the moment, yes.
Okay, great. Now I'm delighted to introduce you to Jordan Kalo, who serves as the Director in the Office of Air Service Development.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak to you all today. We can go to the next slide here. I'm going to show you a few charts that look like this. They are looking at year-over-year statistics. This first one starts with TSA throughput. And these charts, the gray bars show what happened last year, and the red bar, unfortunately, is showing what's happening this year. And the yellow line shows the difference in the two. So we're starting with TSA statistics because they provide the most up-to-date look. We get to see what happened as recently as yesterday, and we even get a little look into the future a few days. But this chart shows what happened through September. The pandemic hit in March, so you can see the big difference between the lines then, and it bottomed out in April where we were down 96%. The TSA numbers show the local passengers that are arriving at the airport and going through security. They do not show what happens in terms of passengers that are connecting in the concourse, mostly with Southwest on their connecting hub. But since April, when we were at that 96% low point, we went up a little bit each month. May was 92% down. June was 80% down. Then we had July 4th and another round of the pandemic hit, and we kind of leveled off since there. We've been in the lower 60s since then. You can see in the gray bars, though, however, that there's a normal seasonality. July is the peak, August is a little lower, and September is significantly lower. So you can see the good news here is that the difference between the red bars in August and September is nowhere near the difference in the gray bars. So we continue to climb in terms of passengers, despite the fact that we're in a historically seasonally low season. Next slide. And we're actually doing better at BWI Marshall compared to other major airports in the region and around the country. This first slide, each line here shows the 3 airports in the Washington, D.C. region. We are the red line, Dulles is the lighter blue line, and Washington Reagan National is the dark blue line. So we're all pretty much down together there in the middle of April, but you can see the red line for BWI pops up much higher than the other ones as we go through here. And if we expand this a little farther on the next slide, this looks at the major airports in the Northeast region, comparing the difference in passengers last year to this year for basically for last week's data. And BWI was down 65%, which sounds awfully bad. But if you were New York JFK, you're down 81%, and you can see the other airports here. So again, we're doing much better than the other 2 airports in the region, which are down about 75%. Next slide. We're back to the year-over-year slides here. These are our official total passenger numbers, which take a little bit more time to come out than the TSA data. We actually set a 12-month passenger record of 27.2 million for the year ending in February, and that's the left half of the slide here where you see the yellow line way up in the top. And then we hit the bottom again in April. And you can see these numbers are actually a little less down than we saw in the TSA numbers. Again, that's because they count the connecting passengers that are happening behind security at the airport. So the August number here is preliminary. We haven't published that officially yet, but it's down about 65%. Next slide. The interesting part is, because we're recovering more quickly than the other airports in the region, in June and July, we actually had more passengers than Dulles and Reagan combined, which Ricky alluded to earlier. So in last year, the splits were 36% BWI, 35% Dulles, and 29% for Reagan National. So we've definitely improved upon them in the recovery from the pandemic. Next slide. Looking just at international passengers, we see the same basic shape here of the lines, but the federal government forced carriers from certain countries, mostly Europe and China and Brazil, to go to certain funneling airports in the US. That started in the middle of March, and we were not one of the funneling airports. So basically all of our international flights stopped at that point. So in the second quarter, all the international traffic we had was from AMC and our military charters. So we ended up down 93%. We were down 96% in April and May, and then 93% in June when Southwest returned. They started flying Cancun and Montego Bay. In preliminary numbers for August, we're down 77%. Next slide. The high point in the industry and at BWI Marshall as well has been cargo. We have the large Amazon facility that's been growing, and the scale on the right side here for the yellow lines is very different than we saw on the other slides. The bottom is 0 here. So in the last few months, we've been up 29%, 36%, 13%, numbers like that. So we're setting new records for cargo every month. Next slide. This slide shows the operations. They've actually fallen much less than the passenger numbers. So we are losing less flights than we're losing passengers. that means the flights are emptier. But you see the big number that's different here is April and May, where those two numbers are about the same. That's because carriers were canceling flights close in during that time period when the extent of the pandemic was unknown. So what they published did not end up being what they actually flew. But April and May ended up down 62% and 61% in operations, which is much better than the 90s we were seeing in the passenger level. So by the time June came around and they had a handle on what was going to happen, the carriers stopped canceling flights the day before or the week before. And so the numbers came back up in June when we were optimistic. It was down 44%, July 28%, and August preliminary numbers are down 29%. So I think we'll see that go back down a little bit as we go forward, which we'll see here again soon. Next slide, please. Next, yeah. So we do have the capability in the air service development world to look at future capacity and what the carriers are selling. So you see a little different shape of the curve here where April is much higher than it actually ended up because of the cancellations. And we can see that the fourth quarter, which we just entered, is down 32% year over year in terms of capacity. That's 41% in October, 31% in November, and 23% in December. But the carriers are finalizing their schedules much later than they normally do. So last week, we actually got most of the carriers updating their November schedules just 1 month in advance. Spirit actually hasn't published their schedule yet in terms of our numbers. I think it's for sale as of a few days ago, and we'll see it at the end of the week. So we expect this November number to go down with Spirit's latest update. And in December, the only carrier that has filed a recent update is Southwest. So we expect those November and December numbers to come down closer to where the October numbers are. Next slide. And in terms of the share that we're seeing going forward, because the carriers haven't really updated December yet, we're still seeing, and Southwest has, we're seeing Southwest at about 65% of the fourth quarter traffic or seats. In the third quarter and second quarter, they were up closer to 75%. The Spirit number at number 2 here that you see at 15% will probably go down as we get their updates for November and December in the next couple weeks. But you can see the legacy carriers are in the single digits going forward. Next slide, I believe that is all. Are there any questions out there, Jonathan?
There are a number of questions. I don't know if there are any directly related to air service, so you may be off the hook at least for the moment. Adrian, are we going into the sort of general question and answer period now? Is that correct, or are there other speakers?
Jonathan, we are going into the general Q&A now.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I know we do not have anyone on the call today from our engineering or construction division, but Ricky, there was a question here from one of our participants asking, and I think this is sort of a lookout at this point, but he's asking, or he or she are asking, about the potential connector project that ties concourses A, B, and C to D and E. Is that something that still is being contemplated, and is there a time frame perhaps for that project?
So hope you can hear me. So well, you know, that project was a priority project for us post the AB connector and baggage handling system project. It was teed up to be the priority project once that project was launched. With COVID, everything has paused to some degree. However, it's still a very important project to us because regardless of the pandemic, our tower isn't getting any newer. Traffic control tower, that's a part of the project. There's still a need to have the connector, the CD connector itself, as well as we suspect when traffic comes back, there will still be a need for a new security checkpoint, which is also part of that. We will need the additional baggage handling capacity. and we will still need a new airport operations center. So there was a lot associated with that project, including hopefully as the market comes back, there will still be demand for the hotel. That was also associated with that project. So it's still an important project, but obviously we have to get back to some level of normalcy post this pandemic, and then we will reevaluate the timing for that project. But we still see it as an important project.
Okay, thank you, Ricky. There are a couple of questions. This would probably go out to Gemini. They're related to concessions and space issues. And I know this was addressed a little bit in the discussion today, but a couple of questions are asked about the Concourse A extension in terms of when we might expect Southwest Airlines to utilize those new gates, and when the concessions that are part of that extension may open. I know the schedule may not be totally defined yet, but they're asking if perhaps we have an idea when those steps may occur.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, so you know, I guess the timing of the taxiway project is really when you know, the closures are going to happen for those gates for A1 through A5. That will open up Southwest to be able to use the A extension gates. So, you know, as everybody's going through the financial hurdles, you know, Southwest is also going through those financial hurdles of, you know, getting their, you know, items in order to be able to, you know, mobilize down on a extension. So that will happen. It will move forward. The timing of that, when Southwest actually takes over those gates, we think it's going to be right for the taxiway T project. They're going to start that mobilization. So we're guessing it's going to be somewhere around March, but we'll have a more definitive answer for everybody once we understand how the taxiway Tango project is going to happen and the timing of when the closure of A1 through A5 is going to happen. So we can keep everybody posted on that schedule.
Thank you very much.
I will say, because I can say stuff that might make my team nervous. The original plan was to embark on the taxiway T project like now, right? The funding is in place, the team is in place. That was the original plan. That would have triggered the need for Southwest Airlines to relocate its operations from A5 to the extent to the new 5 gates on A, like soon, very soon, right? There's some internal discussion with the contractor on the schedule, and so we're trying to figure out a way to have the most aggressive schedule that we can reasonably accomplish. We do have the winter season approaching, and obviously we can't do major taxiway work during the winter season. And so that's what we're trying to work around. Jiminy is right. As of now, that is the schedule, but I've asked my team to look at going back to the original schedule, which would have triggered Southwest relocating pre-winter, which would have allowed our concessions, the 3 new concessions on A, to have the kind of market support that they need to open up earlier. So that's kind of where we are. We're sorting all of this out, and that's kind of why you hear Jiminy thinking as she's talking, because she knows all of this is kind of going on in the background, but she's trying to give you a good answer.
Thank you to you both for that. We have a question here that would probably go to Greg or again, perhaps to Ricky. One of our tenants is asking if the airport is considering to offer COVID-19 screening for customers prior to entering the TSA checkpoints.
I know there's been talk of it. There are some U.S. airports that are starting pilot programs. I think TSA has been talking about it, but as of right now, there's no immediate determination on whether we're going to adopt that policy or not.
So so this has been a hot topic in the industry. A couple airports have actually studied this this option. There has not been a study, to my knowledge, that has been promising. The issue that the industry is trying to overcome is that TSA does not want to hold responsibility for testing. They believe it belongs with a public health organization. They also do not want to be responsible for the cost. The airports don't believe that it's a cost that they should bear. And so there's talk about as a part of the CARES Act discussion, there's a $60 million pilot. There's a pilot that will cost $60 million. Airports don't want to put up the $60 million. TSA doesn't want to be responsible for $60 million. So it's kind of caught up there. There's some airports that, quite frankly, don't see the rationale for investing in that kind of infrastructure, given that, you know, most public health officials don't predict that that we'll be dealing with a COVID environment, you know, 3 years from now. And so to make that kind of investment at airports for something that is a relatively temporary issue or situation is just one of those factors that the industry is kind of dealing with. What we see in Tampa is actually Tampa Airport has partnered with a vendor a lab that does testing. And so they have stations set up where a passenger, for I believe it's $57, you can pay to be tested when you're at the airport. It is not an airport requirement. It is not part of the airport screening process. It's a service that Tampa has made available. In essence, they've established a screening option, a screening station at the airport, but it's not necessarily related to the passengers' attempt to get through the airport. They just happen to have a testing site at the airport. Seattle did a study, and what they determined is that the operating cost alone to have a testing system at the airport would be $10 million a year. That's just the operating cost. That doesn't include the cost of the infrastructure. And so that makes it very difficult for airports to take something like that on. And we haven't even gotten to the point, what do you do with a passenger or a visitor that tests positive? You know, what responsibility does the airport have for that? So it's a complicated issue. The industry is kind of sorting it out. What I suspect is that by the time you know, we come up with some unified opinion on it, it may not be necessary.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that. There's another question here related to concessions, Gemini, and I suspect a lot of this has to do with or any changes would be based largely upon passenger traffic. The submitter asks, they point out that many stores are still closed on D and E. What is the airport doing to reopen those to create a destination for the stores that are currently open in that part of the airport?
Thanks, Jonathan, and thank you for that question. So, you know, one of the things that we're allowing the operators to do through Fraport, so Fraport is working closely with the operators that have concessions down there, and we're allowing them the flexibility of open when they can. They really have to look at what's feasible for them to do. So Fraport works with them closely in determining whether or not it's something that they can open now or open for the future. You know, all of the concession locations are on some sort of timeline, but it's really going to be dependent on whether or not that operator feels comfortable opening their unit and based off of the traffic that we know is in the terminal. Hope that helps answer it.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. I'm looking through the questions here. There are not that many more. One individual is suggesting that we bring some specific plants into the airport terminal to help purify the air. I guess if that individual has some specific suggestions, they can supply that perhaps through airport maintenance and operations, and we can consider that. That, I think, is really about it. Most of these other questions and comments have been addressed at this point. One individual is asking about the plans for the A1 through A5 area related to the new concession space. I think that's related to the AB, the larger AB project, the baggage handling and AB concourse project. And I think those plans are being developed at this point. I think that's really about it for questions at this point. Adrian, do you want to make any last comments or have Ricky perhaps make them closing?
Yes, Ricky has some remarks to make, and then I'll wrap it up with some closing announcements.
The last point I wanted to make, and I neglected to mention this during my opening comments. This is one of the most important initiatives that I think we have going on at the airport. It's certainly unlike any initiative that has happened at other airports, and that is an initiative that we call our customer service initiative. What we've done is MAA is partnering with representatives of, or the leaders of, pretty much all of the service providers in the airport. You name it, if you're providing a service, if you're a tenant, if you're an airline, if you're TSA, customs, you name it, if you're providing a service to our customers in the airport, you're represented in this group. And we've been meeting now for the better part of a year, year and a half. The group has formed committees, or I should say subcommittees, and each subcommittee is working on a number of initiatives, everything from an airport-wide customer service training program to an airport-wide intranet, social gatherings. I mean, they have a litany of initiatives that they're working on, all aimed at, one, creating a more family environment with the airport, to create better connections between all the tenants and stakeholders in the airport, so that we can all better understand how our interaction with the passenger impacts that passenger's experience with someone else in the airport. And we want our passengers to have one great experience, not, you know, a good experience with parking, and then a not so good experience at a ticket counter, and then an improved experience at McDonald's, right? We want it to be a consistent, great experience across the airport. And so this group has done a great job pulling together these initiatives, and they're working together. I mean, they are vested. They're doing this on, I will say, their own time. They're not getting paid extra for this. They're all just, you know, committed and interested in having the airport be a better experience for our common set of passengers. So that is underway. You'll hear a lot more about that. We all signed a declaration that if you have not seen yet, should be available to you. You can go to the local head of your organization. For those food and retail operators, Fraport should be able to make that available to you, but you have a representative in this group, and your representative has been working very hard. And I think this will turn out to be another one of those model initiatives that the rest of the industry will be looking to duplicate. So I've almost felt ashamed that I missed that on the early part, because that is as appropriate to this audience as anything else we're doing. And I thank them all the time when I'm talking to them, and I want to make sure that I recognize the efforts that they're putting in. So that was it, Adrian.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ricky. And I'd like to say thanks to all the program participants, Bernadette Bridges, Greg Solek, Jiminy Erskine, and Jordan Kalo, for the useful information you shared today about the pandemic recovery plan and current operations at BWI Marshall. And thank you, Jonathan Dean, for managing the Q&A portion of the program. Also, thanks to our production team behind the scenes that includes Yvonne Allen, Kelly Tarver, Rachel Goodman, and Anisha Claggett. As a reminder, this is one event of a three-part series that we are doing. If you'd like to participate in the upcoming contractor or MBE Town Hall virtual events, please send us an email at maatownhall@bwiairport.com. I also want to remind everyone that there is a follow-up email coming from us. If there were any questions that weren't answered, they will be included in addition to the PowerPoint slides and the recording of this meeting, and that'll come in the next day or so. BWI Marshall is active on social media, and we invite you to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And in closing, on behalf of the Maryland Aviation Administration, we want to thank all of you, our tenants, for attending today. Your support and participation are important, and we are committed to your success. Until next time, be safe, stay well, and this concludes our program today.